In the tournament of champions that is Fat Bear Week, the merely chubby bears have been winnowed away and only the truly fattest are left standing. On this Fat Bear Tuesday, we conclude another titanic Fat Bear Week, and the two finalists are quintessential examples of success, adaptation, and survival in the bear world. Hi, everyone. This is Mike Pitts, your resident naturalist with Explore.org. And joining me today are my co-hosts, Naomi Boak, Leon Law, and Cheryl Spencer, park rangers at Katmai National Park in Alaska. We're here to talk about the two fattest bears on Brooks River this year as chosen by the public and their journey to achieve such great success. Rangers, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey,
Great,
Mike.
Sure.
If you have questions about fat bears in Fat Bear Week, you can drop those in the comments. We'll do our best to try to answer at least a few of those at the end of the chat. But before we get into the specifics about Fat Bear Week and our two finalists, I do have a couple of quick announcements to make. Ranger Leon and I recorded a Fat Bear Week in the Classroom broadcast. You can find it on Explorer's Bears and Bison YouTube channel. There's a link to that broadcast in the featured comment below the live camera feed. So thanks to all the students who submitted questions and to the teachers who helped them participate in Fat Bear Week. And secondly, Fat Bear Week voters have asked us how they can support Katmai National Park. We have an exciting announcement about that. So stay tuned for it at the end of this broadcast. So we're coming up, Rangers, on the very end of Fat Bear Week. We're within a couple hours of the polls closing for the championship match. So I think this is a good opportunity to maybe recap what happened and what Fat Bear Week is. Cheryl, do you want to be in?
I look forward to continuing to talk about Fat Bear Week as long as possible. But for people who aren't familiar with the competition, it's an annual bracket-style contest hosted by Katmai National Park and our partners at Explore.org and the Katmai Conservancy. It celebrates the incredibly healthy ecosystem within Bristol Bay and Katmai National Park and a successful summer of weight gain for the bears that reside here. Throughout the summer, Katmai's bears focus on packing on as many pounds as possible before they go into hibernation for the winter. Weight gain is extremely critical to the success of bears and their ability to come out of their dens after the winter healthy enough to sustain themselves until they have this abundant resource back in summertime again. So the fatter the bear, the healthier. That's why we're here celebrating fat bears, because the fatter the bear, the more successful they are. And the most fun part about Fat Bear Week is that we get to decide who is the fattest bear. It's up to the public to vote and decide on which of Katmai's bears they think is the Fat Bear Week champion. Now we are almost at the end of this Fat Bear Week contest for this year, but there is still a little bit of time to get in on the fun. Leon, would you like to tell people how they can participate in the fat festivities?
Absolutely. This is our closest matchup of the season, and there is still time to get your vote in. So be sure to go to www.fatbearweek.org. And as a reminder, polls do close at 5 p.m. Alaska time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern time. So you guys have just under 2 hours to get your last votes in. You'll see there that it also does ask for your email. Just as a reminder, we are only doing this to ensure that each person is only voting once. We aren't collecting any information for any purposes, but we do want to make sure that we are ensuring fair voting for our Fat Bear champion. So be sure to get in those last minute votes. Encourage all your friends to do so as well. Naomi, let's talk about, though, how our bears got this fat in the first place. What did summer have for us here? Or Cheryl, I'm sorry.
No, me.
You, I got it right the first time.
You got it right. So, well, this summer was fat and fabulous, and and Fat Bear Week itself was suspenseful. Fat Bears and Fat Bear Week are brought to you by the sockeye salmon and the other salmon that frequent the Brooks River. And that's the main way that our bears get so fat. However, this year, the salmon kept us in suspense. They arrived 3 weeks later than they normally do. And so the bears were kind of hanging around grazing for a while, which is not a lot of sustenance for them and doesn't help them get fat. But eventually the salmon run came, and it came strong. It was sporadic, however. So that meant that the bears had to keep coming back for more salmon. And in a lot of years, when the salmon run just keeps on coming, we see the bears high grade a lot and leave a lot of scraps because they only eat the fattiest part of the fish. We didn't see a lot of that this year. But the salmon came late, and there are a lot of salmon in spawning stages still in the Brooks River. So we have salmon that are yet to spawn, salmon that have spawned, and so the bears are still there getting fat and fatter. So thank you, salmon, for the bears and for us. So Cheryl, how hard did the bears have to work this summer to get so fat?
Well, they work really hard every year, but this year they had to work even harder than usual to gain the necessary weight that they needed to go into for hibernation. And it's been really fun watching them succeed at that, as it always is. Now, a lot of the bears that fish in the Brooks River have been coming here to fish since they were born. They learned from their mom that there's an abundance of fish in the river, and they grew up fishing in this river. And because of that, they sort of know what time of year the fish come back. So they returned to Brooks River this year in early July and late June. And as you said, Naomi, the salmon run was a little late this year. So bears kind of showed up, and as you were describing, there weren't salmon in the river. They were grazing a lot. And so bears did have to work a little bit harder in this sort of in-between time before the salmon came in to get started on putting the weight on that they normally need to this summer. So the late salmon run this year, combined with some slightly higher water levels in the Brooks River, just made it more challenging for bears in general to fish. We were seeing bears that normally would fish in the lower river and spread out, kind of congregating at the falls. The falls sort of became the only place in the river where bears could consistently get fish. And as you can see in this video here, there were a lot of bears at the falls. We were seeing upwards of between 30 to 50 bears sometimes fishing at the Brooks Falls this year, which is higher than usual. And that's just because there weren't as many fish in the low river, and the bears could not spread out like they normally like to. Yeah, so lots of bears this year at the falls. It made it great for bear viewing on the cams and also in person. And the fish did eventually show up in the river, and the bears were able to spread out a little bit more like they normally like to. And we've been seeing them a lot more in the lower river now this time of year as well, as the salmon are spawning and dying and floating downstream. And they've been working really hard, extra hard this year, to get fat enough to go into hibernation. The work is paying off. They're looking nice and chunky. All of our contestants this year and all the other bears in the river have been looking nice and chunky. And they're as fat as they've ever been, which is great. Now, Mike, can you tell us about the final two bears that we have still in contention for the crown this year?
We started with 12 pudgy, portly, stout brown bears, but now there are only just two. No one should be surprised that 151 Walker and 480 Otis are in the final match. Walker got here when voters chose him over 634 Popeye in the first round, 32 Chunk in the quarterfinals, and 132's Spring Cub in the semifinals. On the other side of the bracket, voters chose Otis as the fattest bear over the female 402 in the first round, and then last year's champ 747 in the quarterfinals, and then finally the young adult male known as 812 in the semifinals. Both Walker and Otis, I think, represent success in the bear world. And Naomi, can you tell us a bit more about Otis specifically and his story of survival this year?
I'll try to squeeze it into a short story because, but this is a bear who's been around for a long time. 480 Otis is a legend, and rightly so. Otis is around 26 years old, which is pretty old for a bear. And he came back, like the salmon, he came back to the river late this year. And he had a lot of catching up to do. When you see this picture of Otis, when he first arrived, he was bony and skinny. I mean, he arrived 3 weeks later than he normally has arrived ever. and that meant that he hadn't eaten for a long time. But he is a master of fishing, and he caught up really quickly. And Otis is amazing in his fishing techniques. Some people see him and think, oh, he's just falling asleep. Well, sometimes he is, but most of the time he is staring down, very zen-like, looking for fish. And we have seen Otis catch up to 40 fish in one day. That's 4,500 calories per fish. So you can see how this bear has gotten fat. And in winning over bear 812, his experience and persistence won out. Here he was this week having a little tussle with 812 over that fishing spot. And we talk a lot about how younger bears have challenges in getting as fat as the older bears, but Otis's age helps him in his experience and his knowledge to move less and eat more, but also is a disadvantage in many ways. He's not as dominant a bear as he used to be, so it's harder for him to defend his fishing spots. He doesn't have a lot of teeth left, so that means it takes him longer to chew the salmon. So with all those obstacles in his way, he still managed to reach the finals of Fat Bear Week. And he's not a novice in this contest. He was the original Fat Bear Tuesday champion and has won 2 other contests. So, he knows how to get fat, and he knows how to do well in this competition. But he has quite the competitor this year, a kind of young buck who is moving up in the hierarchy on the Brooks River. Leon, you want to tell us a little bit about 480's competition?
Absolutely. And that bear is none other than 151 Walker. And he has never made it this far in the finals before, despite competing in previous Fat Bear Week tournaments. And it seems that he has been the bear to beat on that side of the bracket, easily beating out 634 Popeye and 32 Chunk, who was last year's runner-up, as well as that Spring Cub too. But 151 Walker, he was identified as a 2-year-old in 2009. And I believe we have a picture of him as a small subadult bear as well. And he has previously been described as a mid-sized, even potentially timid bear, but that is certainly not the case now. He did used to be known for his playfulness, but as he has matured, he tends to play less and he asserts himself more on the river. And this has really been able to give him access to his preferred fishing spots. So he's definitely changed and grown a lot over the years. And we can see this in him becoming more dominant on the river and being able to hold these spots. And if you look back from, again, him as a small bear when he was a subadult, and perhaps even in previous Fat Bear Week brackets, you can definitely see the change that he's had over the course of his life. So if you look at this picture, that was the bracket from 2017 when he competed. And then we also have his pictures from 2019. And you can just see the difference between those 2 years and then how he looks now. And last year, he was estimated to weigh 1,000 pounds or so, and he is looking even larger this year. So he is definitely a tough competitor, and both of these bears really good finalists. But even though today is the final day of Fat Bear Week, bears still have plenty of the year left at Brooks. Cheryl, what does that look like for bears now then?
Well, it looks like a lot of fishing still. As we can see on the live cams on explore.org, bears are still in the river. They're still working to pack on these pounds, especially since the salmon run was a little bit late this year. That's probably going to translate into bears potentially hanging out longer in the river than they have in years past, just because there will still be fish there. The Brooks River is an indispensable resource for these bears. And the salmon that reside within them are, as Naomi said, the sponsors of this event. They are the heartbeat of the Brooks River and this wonderful ecosystem we have here in Katmai. And we can see how that resource has really helped these bears get nice and fat and super happy. And specifically at this time of year, hyperphagia really fuels these bears to just continue to eat and eat and eat, and really try and gain as much weight as they can before they go into hibernation. They are hard at work right now trying to pack on the few dozen pounds, or maybe 4 or 5 dozen pounds, depending on the bear, that they can get before they have to go migrate to their dens, which will be the next step of their journey this time of year. Right now, we can still see plenty of bears fishing in the lower river, and even some still at the falls. And they'll hang out there, as I said, until there's not really anything there left to eat. However, the closer we get to winter, and the closer we get to these food sources disappearing from the river, bears will slowly and slowly start making their way away from the Brooks River. As it becomes more challenging to navigate the weather, and the climate, and the declining amount of food in the river, bears will start making their way to dig their dens to go into hibernation. Hibernation is a fascinating and amazing adaptation that bears have started doing or do, so that they can survive the long winter where there's not that many resources, and dealing with the weather can be challenging. It's really interesting, and it's a fascinating thing that bears do. Mike knows a lot about hibernation. Mike, can you tell us what is hibernation, and what do the bears do when they're in there, and what's it all about?
Well, at least I pretend to know a lot about hibernation. But it is, like, I completely agree. Yeah, it is a fascinating topic. It's a fascinating behavior and adaptation that brown bears have. The whole purpose of the bears' efforts to get fat are to prepare them for hibernation. And although we don't know where the individual bears that use Brooks River today specifically hibernate, we do know the habitat that they'll seek. Bears from Brooks River travel generally to the nearby mountains to dig their dens. They aim for steep, well-vegetated slopes that collect and hold a lot of snow. On those slopes, they dig straight into the hillside, and that allows them basically just to move the least amount of earth. So digging a den kind of horizontally into the hillside, and you look at this photo here, in the center of that image, those 2 dark spots are previously used bear dens. And bear dens themselves are cozy spaces. They're usually just big enough for the bear to crawl into and curl into into a ball. Thick vegetation helps, the thick vegetative cover helps to support the den structure through winter, and the snow cover helps to insulate the den from the cold outside air. And this is yours truly several years ago, poking around in one of those abandoned bear dens up on Dumpling Mountain. So this is probably about 1.5 miles straight line from Brooks Falls, so not too far away. Some of the bears may travel much farther than that. In fact, most of them will. We don't see that many bear dens on Dumpling Mountain. So most of the bears are probably traveling 10, 15, 20 miles or more. In the 1970s, one bear was thought to travel 40 miles or tracked about 40 miles away to a presumed denning site. So they can have quite a journey, but sometimes the bear dens can be quite close to Brooks River. But what happens inside of the bear den is equally fascinating, maybe even more so. Inside the den, bears stay healthy by utilizing some of the most marvelous physiologic and metabolic adaptations of any mammal. Their heart rates decline to about 8 to 10 beats per minute, and they breathe only about 1 to 2 times per minute. Incredibly, they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't urinate, they don't defecate inside of the den. So they're in there for several months without partaking in sort of like those basic behaviors that we do every day of our lives. Yet despite a complete lack of food or exercise, they don't experience bone loss or muscle loss. They burn body fat to stay warm and hydrated, and they're able to recycle their metabolic waste and calcium to keep their muscles and bones healthy. Mother bears even give birth and nurse their newborn cubs in the den while they are hibernating. And getting fat allows bears to survive wintertime's famine. But let's not forget that bears also experience hardships after they exit the den in the spring. Leon, what can you tell us about the lives of bears in the spring and how bears might survive that period?
Yes, so all of hibernation is remarkable, and they do emerge remarkably healthy, but also remarkably hungry. And spring is still a very lean time for bears. There really isn't that much food available to them until the salmon runs really start. So they might be on feasting on whatever is available, which is pretty limited. Grasses, perhaps overwintered berries. And so they are really still losing fat during that time. So goes back to the importance of having those extra fat reserves, not just to make it through winter, but even in spring after they emerge. And then, of course, once the salmon start running, we start the whole thing over again. And we start thinking about the next Fat Bear Week. But we can't get ahead of ourselves. We are still celebrating this year. So, Mike, can you give us a recap?
Absolutely. So briefly, we winnowed our competition down. The public chose amongst 12 bears, and now we're left with just 2 finalists today. The polls are open until 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Alaska time. Be sure to vote at fatbearweek.org. And this is the closest race, I think, so far in Fat Bear Week 2021. So be sure to cast your vote if you haven't done so already. It's been great to share the success of these bears with people around the world. And the voters really have stepped up to weigh in this year. Last year, we got more than 600,000 votes in Fat Bear Week. But before the polls opened for the final match today, you cast almost 700,000 votes. So I think we could get to 800,000 today. It's going to be pretty close to that overall. So an incredible amount of engagement from people all over the world. Thanks everyone who has participated this year and helped to raise awareness for Brooks River and brown bears and the stories of their survival and success. Before we get to the conclusion of the broadcast and start to answer a few viewer questions, I do want to mention one thing about how you can help support Katmai's Bears. Today marks the start of the Otis Matching Fund to benefit the Katmai Conservancy. The Katmai Conservancy is the official nonprofit partner of Katmai National Park, and I'm pleased to be a volunteer member of its board of directors. The Conservancy supports the preservation of Katmai by promoting greater public interest, appreciation, and support of the park through education, interpretation, and research. So today, starting this evening through October 9, you'll have 3 ways to contribute to the Otis Fund. You can go to the Katmai Conservancy's website, which is katmaiconservancy.org. You can go to explore.org's Facebook page and also on explore.org's YouTube page. We'll post links to where you can donate in the comments below and on fatbearweek.org. Your donations to the Otis Fund will be matched by explore.org up to $10,000 at first. The final match total will be announced during a live event with the Katmai Conservancy and yours truly this Saturday, October 9 at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Find out more, of course, about the Katmai Conservancy at katmaiconservancy.org. Of course, any donation is welcome. But no matter if you can afford to donate to the Otis Fund or not, you can also champion the cause of healthy salmon runs and fat brown bears by supporting efforts to protect their habitat, talking to other people about this amazing place, and by electing people at all levels of government who will work to tackle the climate crisis and protect wild spaces. As part of this fundraiser, I'm also pleased to announce our brown bear superlatives. This is something that we really haven't done before, really not since I toyed with this idea when I was a park ranger in 2015 at Katmai. Each day during the fundraiser, we'll have 2 superlative categories open for voting. The categories include best pro wrestler, who is most likely to become dominant, the best bear butt of the year, most improved angler, and a few others. You can vote for those, again, during the fundraising campaign, October 6th through 9 on explore.org's Brooks Falls Bear Cam page on YouTube. So again, that's going to be on the Brooks Falls Bear Cam page on YouTube. There's going to be 2 superlatives per day. One will be open from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern and the other from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you're watching on the Brooks Falls Cam on explore.org, you want an easy way to find that YouTube channel, hover your cursor or tap on the live camera window if you're using a mobile device, and look for the words YouTube in the lower right corner. Tap on that or click on it, and you'll be taken right to that correct channel. Look in the chat on that page for the links to the polls. We'll announce the winners during the Katmai Conservancy and Brooks River Bear Celebration event on October 9th. So I'm excited for everyone to show their support and for that event on October 9th. Rangers, it's been wonderful to work with you this year. And I know we still have a few more live events in store throughout the month of October. So this isn't the very end of the season, even though Fat Bear Week is drawing to a close. And many of our bears at Brooks River will begin to sort of disperse away towards their winter denning sites. But I did have one question for everybody right now, because I'm curious to know, what is perhaps one memorable moment from you, or that you witnessed at Brooks River this year?
Sure, I'll start off. Katmai is remarkable in that we get to see so many things here. And part of that, you viewers get to see too if you watch the live cams. And I know that this moment in particular was captured on the bear cams, but I was also there on the platform at that time too. So I got to see it in person. And that would be 909's spring cub charging after another bear. Mom had just gotten a fish, and this spring cub was definitely not going to allow anybody else to come in and get part of that. And to just witness this tiny little ball of fur and the audacity and boldness in person was amazing. So that would be my moment.
That's a great choice. Naomi, what did you see this year?
Well, I mean, so many great moments. I mean, there's nothing like walking out of your cabin and being within 10 feet of 128 Grazer and her cubs. But my most memorable moment actually happened today on the cams. And that was seeing 89 backpacks sitting on his rock in the river. And the reason that is so memorable for me is I would not be here as a park ranger if it were not for 89 backpack. In early October in 2014, for some reason, I stumbled upon the bear cams, and there was this Buddha-like bear sitting on his rock, contemplating the world like the thinker. And I said, I got to watch this stuff. And I just kept watching and watching and watching. So to see Backpack on his rock today, and he hasn't been on that rock for years. So to see him on that rock today, the last day of Fat Bear Week, brought a tear to my eye, because he's the reason I'm here. So that was my most memorable moment. So all that seeing bears all season, but we still have memorable moments on the cams as well.
And Cheryl, what one moment might stick out in your mind this year?
Well, as the four of us have experienced living in Brooks Camp, one of the most exciting parts of being a ranger out there is early on in the summer, when we're sort of waiting for all the bears to come back. It's kind of like Christmas every day, because a new bear might emerge that we haven't seen yet that summer, and it's really exciting, and everyone gets really really pumped up about it. And this year, one of my favorite moments was when Bear 42 came back, and she had those spring cubs with her. And this was, oh man, like literally one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my life was these two spring cubs sort of hitching a ride on their mom's back as she was fishing in the lower river. And they kept doing it all the time. But the first time it happened, I remember I was leaving camp for the day, and I'd been working all day and had been so busy. And out comes 42 with these adorable little cubs, and they were just riding on the back of her as she went and fished the river. It was so insanely cute and magical. That was definitely one of my absolute favorite moments from this summer. Probably like objectively one of the cutest things that's ever happened on the planet, I think.
Objective.
It's hard to debate that too. So I think those are all wonderful responses. I mean, bear cam means different thing to different people. I think a lot of us tune into the cams to find solace and relaxation, to be reminded of a place that's healthy and functioning at its full potential. For me this year, I think maybe the one moment that stood out to me, and it's one that I didn't witness in person because it happened after I left Brooks River for the summer. I was only there for a couple of weeks, but it was seeing so many bears at Brooks Falls in early August. I mean, that was unprecedented for that time of the year. So that was really surprising to me. And it's always one of those, it's always fascinating to see how each summer at Brooks River is different, how the bears utilize the river differently, depending on the timing of the salmon run, the competition that they end up facing. And we might be seeing a shift in bear activity at the river towards more of a midsummer use. I mean, it used to be kind of like an early summer thing only, and the bears just kind of vanished in August. That was the typical scenario when I was a ranger at Brooks River, but it really does seem to be changing now, where bears are sticking around more and more in August. I don't know if that's going to be something that holds going into the future, but it's been the trend over the last several years. So I find that to be a fascinating process as well. But so thanks for your honesty and sharing those stories with everybody. If anyone has stories of their own about their favorite Fat Bear Week moments, you can post those in the comments as well, either today or during the Katmai Conservancy celebration on October 9th. We'll be happy to read those. I love to read those comments as well. And we'll get to some audience questions here in just a moment. But I just do want to say one more thing, that Fat Bear Week is an opportunity for us to consider the challenges that bears face in order to gain enough weight to survive winter. And it also allows us to marvel at their success as well as the health and productivity of Katmai's ecosystems. The two Fat Bear Week finalists this year, both those bears who are behind me, either Walker or Otis, they are quintessential examples of success in the supreme adaptations that bears possess to survive. The sockeye salmon of Bristol Bay and the bears of Katmai who depend on them represent a beacon of hope in a world that is wounded by mass extinction and human-driven climate change. So let us use them to remind ourselves that all is not lost. There's a lot to save everywhere and for everyone, now and the future, if we work together to do so. And I think that's one thing that Fat Bear Week helps to represent. Rangers, yeah, great conversation today, but I know our audience is curious about a few things. You want to stick around for a few more moments and answer some of their questions?
Love to.
Sure.
Well, our first question here in the queue is one that I think we're going to have to speculate on, because I don't think any of us know this for sure, but somebody was wondering, will all of the same bears be back next year? I can say the majority of them will, but we don't know that for sure. Maybe you can elaborate on some of the reasons.
Well, I mean, they keep us guessing, and I will say about 480 Otis, he kept us guessing for a long time this year, and given his age, we were not sure if he were going to be back. So sometimes the young males go off and find new fishing grounds, so they're not competing with the older males. I'm sure you guys have other thoughts about who will be back and who won't.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. We don't know for sure which bears are going to come back. Sometimes I know we see bears that fish at the river one year, we don't see them for a couple years, and then they might come back subsequently a few years down the road. I'm sure the salmon run affects that, but that's part of the fun and the mystery, I guess, is the anticipation of who we will see returning every year.
And I'll say part of my anticipation is not just who's going to be returning, but what new bears we might see too. So yeah, you just never know what you're going to see.
Yeah, it's a reason to tune in for sure. Watch the webcams when they go live next June. I find it fun to watch the webcams in that season, even though like in late June we don't see that many bears, just because, like Cheryl was mentioning earlier, we get to see kind of new bears every day, and it's almost a little bit like Christmas to see them come back. Next question that we have in our lineup here is a question that we've answered a few times this year, but I do think it's worth answering again. Somebody was wondering, of course, a lot of people are wondering, do we know if any of the bears are offspring of Otis? We don't know, but Naomi, you talked to Ranger Michael Saxton about that in a live chat earlier today, so maybe you want to revisit the reasons why we don't know.
Michael Saxton now, who is in bear management, who is now Dr. Michael Saxton, has been studying a number of things about the bears and hibernation, and among those genetics. And he darted a number of bears over recent years, and a lot of them in 2018. And unfortunately, those tissue samples of 2018 were lost, and Otis's samples were among those. So we may not know if Otis fathered any cubs. It's likely that he did. We just won't know for sure.
And that's not uncommon for male bears, just to have that uncertainty. We have very little information on the paternity in brown bears, just because male bears play no role in raising the offspring. So it's a mystery, and it's likely to remain a mystery into the future. Our next question is about Otis. Again, I mean, he has shown a remarkable ability to get fat this year. But this question is, how much do you think Otis weighed when he showed up this year, and how much does he weigh now? Do any of you remember what he was estimated to weigh last fall? I can't quite remember, but that might give us a starting point.
Was it around 900 pounds? Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, I think 900 to 1,000 sounds right. For last year, I would say this fall as well, especially now in the past few weeks, he's gained a lot more weight. He's probably, I would say, comfortably around the same weight now. I think he was skinnier when he showed up this year than he was when he showed up last year, though.
Yeah, I mean,
he definitely looked thinner for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Otis, again, a remarkable story of success overall. He's a great bear to watch, and I think there's a reason why so many people voted for him this year. They like to root for the underdog, and Otis has certainly shown an ability to persevere despite the challenges of being an older bear. So I wouldn't doubt if he's close to 900 pounds right now. Bears are experiencing a change in their bodies at this time of the year that makes them be hungry all the time, and that's called hyperphagia. And somebody had a question about that. Does hyperphagia make bears more dangerous to humans? Leon, you had a trip that was scheduled to go to Brooks Camp at the end of the week, so it's canceled, so you're not going to be going out there, but you would have been experiencing these bears in person at that time of the year. So I'm wondering, if you were thinking along those lines, hey, these bears are hyperphagic, and maybe I need to be a bit more cautious.
I think it's just important to remember that bears are always doing what they need to do to survive. And so we just need to be conscious of that. And during hyperphagia, they really are hyper-focused on their food. So it is just something to be aware of, but are they necessarily more dangerous? We haven't seen any evidence of that, but it just is something to always keep safety in mind, no matter what time of year it is, really.
And along those lines, of course, the bears are hyperphagic. They don't feel full at this time of the year, so they're eating as much as possible because their stomachs, never reach a point of satiation, essentially. But they're going to go to their dens soon. So our next question here is about that. Do bears reuse a den? In other ecosystems and places in North America, they can. But what about in Katmai? Naomi, do you want to elaborate on that? How do the bears dig? What do they do? Do they reuse a den in Katmai?
Well, in Katmai, no, they don't reuse the dens because the dens actually collapse at the end of winter. They go up to, as you mentioned before, to a certain height where the soil is firm enough to hold them, and that snow will cover over them. But those dens really are not reusable second season. Where bears have caves, they reuse those. They don't have to dig anything. They can go into those caves. But here at Katmai, the nature of the soil and the turf makes it so the bears have to dig every year.
And a related question to that, maybe Cheryl, I'll throw this one to you, because I think maybe in one of our recent chats, you were talking about the specifics, and correct me if I'm wrong, the specific maybe elevation range that bears seek their dens in, or to dig their dens in. So somebody was wondering, do they always have to dig their dens at high altitudes?
Katmai bears specifically, I would say they don't necessarily have to. We see that they do dig their dens in higher elevations, and that does tend to be, going back to what Naomi was saying about the texture of the soil needing to be a certain kind of level of compactness. I would say that the elevation in the Katmai area is maybe not as high as people might think it is. Those clips that you were showing earlier, Mike, of the dens on Dumpling Mountain doesn't, the elevation there is just around 3,000 feet high. So it's not in a super highly elevated area, but they do dig up. So they're not going to dig dens lower on the ground near where the Brooks River is, for instance. They will go up to higher areas, such as Dumpling Mountain, such as Mount Katolanat. And then I do believe the last time they did a study tracking the dens back in the 1970s, they also found them on Mount Calais near the river as well.
Yeah, so they're really looking for, I think, the right type of habitat rather than like a specific elevation. So if they can find a place that collects and holds a lot of snow and the soils will support, a stable den throughout the wintertime, then that's maybe their first choice. But often they have to go to higher elevations in Katmai because the higher elevations don't tend to thaw in midwinter. But sometimes you'll get storms like blowing off the Pacific, for instance, in the winter, and that brings some above freezing air temperatures. And at the elevations maybe around Brooks River, that can melt the snow off of the ground. But you just go up like 1,000 feet on Dumpling Mountain, and then you might have a more stable snow cover up there. So it varies from bear to bear, of course, but they're really kind of looking for, I think, the right type of habitat. Next question here is actually about bears and salmon and whether they're losing weight already. I don't know if anyone in particular wants to answer this question, but somebody was wondering how some of the bears already lost weight since the salmon run kind of pushed through. Maybe we could clarify about like the length of the salmon run itself, because it's more than just a migration period.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take this one. They are getting so fat. I mean, you watch the cams, and those bears are they're getting fatter every day. And because there are a lot of salmon in the river that are still spawning, and those are the salmon that the bears at the falls are actually catching. And then throughout the river, there are dead and dying salmon, those salmon that have are spawned out. So the bears are continuing to eat. They're continuing to get fat. It's a different kind of feast than during the migration. The salmon have many more calories. Salmon don't eat once they come into fresh water, so all of their energy is used to produce new life. And so by the time they've spawned, there's very little caloric energy left in that salmon. So during the height of the run, those are really high calorie treats for the bears. Right now, they're not so high calorie, but there's a ton of it. So the bears they're still getting fatter.
I think we might have time for just one more question here. We'll try to answer, I think, a few of the ones that we didn't answer in the comments after the chat. So thanks to everyone who has been listening and submitting questions. One final question here, though, is again about hibernation. We might try to do a hibernation and denning chat later this year. Somebody was wondering, how do the bears know to go to their dens? Yeah, again, I don't know who wants to tackle that question. It's a bit of a complicated one, but the bears seem to have an instinct for it.
Well, I mean, I think the first trigger is there food for them to eat. They'll hang around the river as long as there's stuff for them to be eating, even if it is just dead salmon. So if the river is still full of food and the weather is not too bad, the bears will definitely hang around. So I would say the first trigger of their instinct to go to den would be a lack or abundance of food for them to eat. The next bit, I think, would be the weather. If there's food around, but it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit and 40-mile-an-hour winds every day, bears might not think it's worth the effort and the calories that they would need to use to sort of tolerate that kind of climate in order to continue to eat fish. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that, but
it certainly
Mike,
seems to square with, it certainly seems to square with what I have read.
Yeah, I was just saying also, Mike might comment about the physiological changes that are happening with the bears at that time. Something about a circadian rhythm almost, where there's something happening in their metabolism that's pushing them to den as well.
That's right. It's a long, slow transition into that hibernation metabolism and physiology. It's not like a switch that just sort of happens. So some of the bears who might go to their dens early might be experiencing it right now. It seems like studies of wild brown bears, the limited information we have on that suggests that their metabolism starts to slow down maybe a few weeks before they enter the den, and then it doesn't really kind of tank completely until a few weeks after they're in the den itself. So it might be triggered by day length and then their internal, hormonal rhythms across a whole year. And then, like Cheryl mentioned, definitely food availability. If there's a lot of food, they might stay out longer. If there's warmer weather, maybe they'll stay out longer. But if it's cold and there's not food, hey, it's time to just cut your losses and get into that den overall.
I feel
thanks.
the same way.
I think a lot of people do once winter starts to roll around. But I would like to thank, of course, our rangers for spending the time to share their knowledge of Brooks Rivers bears with us. We'll have, I think, a few more live events in store with Katmai National Park coming up over the next several weeks. So we'll get that schedule out as soon as we can. But my co-hosts today were all park rangers from Katmai National Park, Ranger Naomi Boak, Ranger Leon Law, and Ranger Cheryl Spencer. Thanks so much for spending the time to be here today.
Thank you, Mike.
Always a pleasure.